to imagine what that was like for Lucy Connolly, to be jailed for 2 years and 7 months for words online that she deleted and just put out there in the heat of the moment and regretted afterwards. To be in that courtroom, to be sobbing, to imagine you could be freed, to imagine that this could be the day it's over for you, the hell is over, and then to not be allowed to go home.
Breaking right now, Lucy Connolly, the housewife, the grieving mother, and the British political prisoner, is spending at least 3 more days in jail, putting her tally behind bars to 282 days after the Court of Appeal, delayed its decision as to whether her sentencing was unfair. Now, as you'll know, I was at this trial at the Court of Appeal yesterday. The whole case blows my mind. It's completely disgusting. Lucy was brilliant. She's you, she's me, and she doesn't deserve to be there. But the great news is some major support incoming. Katie Hopkins, talking about the delay, wrote, "The appeal court does not need time to make a judgment. The Stasi do not want to allow scenes of celebration or to be shown to be wrong. So they didn't want the announcement on the day when we were all there. Rather, they will do the judgment on paper." But a really significant development overnight. Elon Musk, even though he's trying to stay out of international politics at the moment, given his role in the Trump administration, has backed Lucy Connolly via X, the former Twitter. And this is via their Global Affairs department, which posted Lucy Connolly, a user of the X platform, posted a comment on X in the aftermath of the Southport massacre in the UK. As a mother who lost her firstborn at 19 months old and has a 12-year-old child, she was triggered by the unjust suffering and death of children attending their local dance class. Her understandable frustration came out in her post on X. After cooling down and a walk with her dog, she decided to remove the post. Despite the post being live for only a few hours and her subsequent deletion of the post, she was arrested and charged under Section 19 of the Public Order Act for publishing material intending to stir up racial hatred. Based on advice she received while in custody, she pled guilty and was convicted. Lucy believed a guilty plea would result in her being able to get back to her family faster. Instead, she was sentenced to 31 months in jail because of her post and denied the ability to release on temporary license, which allows inmates up to 2 days at home with their families. The Free Speech Union, a non-profit that X has worked with on similar matters, is providing Lucy with representation to appeal her sentence. X wholeheartedly supports Lucy and the Free Speech Union in this case. Hear, hear. That is a really significant backing that Lucy Connolly has received. And what's amazing, of course, is that when I spoke to Lucy on the phone before the case yesterday, she was feeling nervous, but there is a sense of positivity that hopefully, because of the huge traction now that her case is receiving, that something good can come out of this. And the good has to be our protection of free speech and also our protection to make mistakes online as well without being locked up away from your family for 3 years. But that wasn't where the support ended. Rupert Lowe wrote quite clearly, Lucy Connolly should not be in prison. No ifs or buts there. And of course, the huge hypocrisy of the case was also pointed out by suffragette Gent, who wrote, Lucy Connolly is already 7 months into a 31-month sentence. Meanwhile, Labour's Ricky Jones still hasn't been tried. This is blatant two-tier justice. Now, the left has, of course, reacted horrendously to this case. I'm going to show you some of that in just one moment. But first, I want to thank Katie Hopkins, actually, because she brought a huge amount of international attention to this case. We'll get analysis from Connor Tomlinson of Tomlinson Talks and Courage Media in just one moment. But first, let's have a look at what Katie had to say.
A couple of things on Lucy Connolly and her appeal. I'm just backstage ahead of a show tonight. So first up, a massive well done to everybody who turned up and actually was there to hear the appeal or to be outside. Dan Wootton, Alison Pearson, the hard work of the Free Speech Union. So important to get eyeballs on these sorts of things. Secondly, To imagine what that was like for Lucy Connolly, to be jailed for 2 years and 7 months for words online that she deleted and just put out there in the heat of the moment and regretted afterwards. To be in that courtroom, to be sobbing, to imagine you could be freed, to imagine that this could be the day it's over for you, the hell is over, and then to not be allowed to go home. And the point I'm really trying to get to is, of course, the judge doesn't have to take time to decide. The judge could have made a decision there and then. They're equipped with all the facts. They know the law, such that it is. They could have made that decision as they did for other people, like Labour MPs, for example, who beat people to a pulp on the streets. But no, they sent her back to prison and said that there will be a written verdict. And the reason for that is the government doesn't want people celebrating a win outside. The government doesn't want to give power to the Free Speech Union, to Alison Pearson, or to any of the other independent journalists covering this. And most of all, the government doesn't want to look like it was in the wrong for jailing her in the first place. So the truth of it is, the appeal doesn't really matter. The appeal court doesn't matter. The judge doesn't matter, because it's the corrupt government that are deciding how this gets handed down in a written way a few days later, so that no one can be seen celebrating and no one can question the wildly authoritarian regime that Brits now have to live under. That's all I wanted to say.
Very powerful. Connor Tomlinson, do you agree with Katie Hopkins?
Almost to the letter. The only thing I will say is I don't want to evade accountability for the judges on this matter, because the government doesn't actually appoint the judges, even though Keir Starmer agrees with the Blairite legislation that changed the appointment of judges, taking it away from the Lord Chancellor, who would sort of politically appoint them, to now the Judicial Review Council, which does it in a back room that no one can see, and then selects these activists by hand picking them. And the reason I raise this is because Judge Melbourne Inman KC, who is the one who sentenced Lucy in the first place to 31 months, there was a really interesting piece in The Spectator in March by Jonathan Miller, and he tried to look into this judge's background, and he seems to have appeared from thin air. Nobody knows anything about him other than all of his rulings are questionable. For example, Mohammed Abkar is a schizophrenic who doused 2 men in a mosque in petrol, 2 other Muslims, and set them alight. Inman gave him a hospital order rather than a prison sentence. Lucy Connolly, for a deleted tweet, 31 months in one of the hardest prisons. But this chap, he gets ice cream and bedtime. There was someone else as well. There was a chap who killed someone for dangerous driving. This is Antonio Boparan, again, another good British name. I wonder if that factored into the sentence. And he got an 18-month sentence and served only 9 months, so much less than that served and given to Lucy Connolly. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out with the judges is that Laurie Wastel of the Free Speech Union, someone that everyone should be following on Twitter because he does fantastic work, he has been transcribing bits and pieces that the cross-examination and the Crown Prosecution Service was saying at yesterday's trial, as you well know, Dan. And they were asking Lucy Connolly whether she has strong views on immigration, if she thinks that children were unsafe because of illegal immigration, does she feel threatened by immigrants, and does she hold a hatred of migrants? Now, you might be asking yourself, what could that possibly have to do with whether or not there was a miscarriage of justice that went on here? And the answer is, as Katie has alluded to, this is a political prosecution. This is Lucy Connolly being treated as a sacrificial lamb to uphold the multicultural narrative and the false narrative that Keir Starmer spread multiple times, that the Southport riots were a reaction of Islamophobic racist hatred by an organized far right, something that a report just this week has come out and completely disproven. So they are trying to make Lucy Connolly and people like Peter Lynch and everyone else that's still in prison under false pretenses the scapegoats for the fact that the government narrative is completely untenable, especially in light of Keir Starmer this week and coming out and saying mass immigration is not a far-right issue and we don't want to feel like a nation of strangers. Why is Lucy Connolly still being held hostage in jail over her views on immigration when the Prime Minister, who mobilized magistrates' courts to lock up mothers like her, has just come out and said that concerns about immigration are very legitimate? This is clearly the political corruption of the justice system.
Absolutely. And yeah, it was brilliant actually seeing that exchange on X, because it was so obvious what the state prosecutor was trying to do, even though Lucy, during her testimony, and you can watch my video where I outline everything that went on during Lucy's evidence. But she makes it abundantly clear that she had absolutely no intention to incite racial hatred. And more to the point, Connor, and it was really effective the way that Lucy's defense outlined this in court. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous to suggest that she was trying to incite violence, right? Because the timeline doesn't match up, because she posted her tweet on the first night, but she wasn't arrested until after the riots because her tweet hadn't been picked up widely at that point. In the intervening period, Connor, she had posted multiple tweets discouraging violence, actually condemning the riots, saying she was opposed to violence, saying that they were not legitimate protests, and saying that the riots only played into the hands of the mainstream media and the establishment. So it was so obvious. It's just a fact that she wasn't trying to incite violence. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact checkers, as we're always talking about, because they claim to determine which facts are true. The good reason we're losing trust. Think about the ongoing debates over free speech or Brexit or Trump or trans issues. But the good news is I've found a solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It has been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see for yourself at ground.news/outspoken. I'm going to tell you about an incredible discount opportunity today in just one moment, but first let me show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's use my favorite story of the year. The Supreme Court ruled that women can only be biological adult human females, reversing years of trans extremism. In one place, Ground News puts the 350 sources covering the story. Then they instantly show how the story is being covered by the media, broken down by whether it leans to the left or the right. This is called the bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story, along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So we can see for ourselves quite clearly that on the right, the Daily Wire covered the case very accurately with the headline, UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women. Spiked Online was even more forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. And the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. David Tennant, I'm looking at you. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists. And the Canary ran with this hilarious headline, victory for the far right, as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. So yep, J.K. Rowling, she's far right now. Yeah, right, I say. My favourite feature, though, the blind spot feed. This services upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you love the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. Go to ground.news/outspoken or scan the QR code to subscribe today. Get 40% off the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access. That's 40% off right now at ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Yes, and there was another bit that Laurie tweeted out, the concluding remarks from the Crown Prosecution Service saying Lucy's post was a continuing reflection of her racist mindset, and that other posts demonstrated her racist views, and that she clearly intended to stir up racial hatred and serious violence. They also, as Alison Pearson covered in her original Telegraph piece about Lucy's story, which brought the world's attention to just how bad it was. Obviously, you'd been covering her unjust imprisonment for a while, but it had exclusive details. The Crown Prosecution Service and the police lied about Lucy and said she was a racist to justify her imprisonment after the fact. Now, I'm going to say something incredibly inflammatory here, as I want to do, but it's only inflammatory to people who have lost their mind. I don't care if people are a racist. It shouldn't be a criminal offense. You should not be a racist, as in you should not have hatred for someone else's skin color based on nothing else other than their appearance, right? As a Christian, I think that's abhorrent. Judge people by their actions, not by their complexion. Should it be a criminal offense? Especially, should it be a criminal offense when people, as we mentioned earlier in the show, that are administering this are Keir Starmer, an activist judiciary, and a media class who think that milk or talking about the ethnic and religious composition of Pakistani rape gangs.
And also, by the way, no one is suggesting that Hums are useless. is locked up, the former Scottish First Minister, for his anti-white racism. And by the way, we would not encourage that either. We'd just rather have the debate. But you've got to be very careful if we do start saying that distasteful speech gets you locked up. And again, if you look at Lucy's original tweet, yeah, people can say it wasn't nice. That's fine. But she wasn't inciting violence because she said, go and do that for all I care. It was very, very different to actually inciting violence. But of course, the left have been utterly vile on this. And I wanted to show you, Connor, and get your reaction to exchange on GB News between the very sound Ben Habib and the very distasteful Joe Phillips.
Instead of being honest about Rudy Cabana and getting up and telling the nation what had happened, he categorized everyone who was protesting as far right. He directed the criminal justice system to detain them, remand them, charge them, and find them guilty. It was the biggest example of politicized policing, criminal justice in this country.
The government cannot demand that people are found guilty.
That is precisely what he did.
It is not. Well, where's your proof?
Well, watch the clip, Joe.
Where is your proof?
Get the clip. Watch what Starmer said.
Right, I am going to
They will be apprehended,
anyway,
they will be charged, and they will be imprisoned.
She deserved to go to prison. What she said was disgusting. It was unforgivable. She knows that. She's pled guilty to that at the earlier hearing. It may be that it was too long. It may be tomorrow at her sentencing, and we'll see what sort of a woman she is when she comes out.
I mean, that is left literally showing their true colours, isn't it? We disagree with you. We think your views are disgusting. So we want to send you to jail to change you, to silence you.
As usual, people like Joe Phillips wouldn't have a job if Ofcom weren't mandating that these idiots be paid to appear for balance. But it would be fantastic if they could at least do a little bit of research. For example, the Home Office, as now Lord Toby Young of the Free Speech Union has pointed out before, seems to have broken their own Online Safety Act law, because during the aftermath of the Southport protests and riots, when they were snatching people up off the street, there was a video that they posted to Twitter of them apprehending a man while aboard a flight. And they said that these criminals will all be locked up. So this was before the people had been charged and even convicted. The Home Office, the government, were designating them as criminals by the fact that they had been present at a protest, had posted something online, and that they had arrested them for an obviously political act. And so, Joe, completely incorrect. And then her justification of Lucy Connolly rotting in prison for 31 months for a tweet where she did not incite violence and it would not pass the sniff test under the Brandenburg test for free speech and imminent incitement to violence in the US. Absolutely disgraceful. Alexander Solzhenitsyn described these people in the Gulag Archipelago as the same kind of crackpot Marxists who, even if they were hauled off in cuffs on some false charge, would still insist that they themselves had done something wrong because the regime that they believed in ideologically was infallible. It was correct. And so I genuinely think that, so one of the people that have been snatched up under these malign online speech legislation was a Lib Dem councillor, right? This was only a little while ago. He was a Times radio producer as well. And he had complained about his daughter's school on a WhatsApp group. And he is one of 12,000 every year that get arrested on these spurious charges. Now, Joe is from the Lib Dems. John Sweeney, who had a shouting match with me in the Frontline Club a little while ago, saying that, why do you care about free speech in Britain? Because Russia is way worse. He was also a Lib Dem candidate. When one of their own has been snatched up under these spurious speech charges, they don't even think to question it. These people outsource all of their thinking to the law and ideology. And you know what? If Joe Phillips was in Lucy Connolly's place, I think she'd somehow work out a way to justify her own imprisonment. So yeah, I wouldn't take her word for mustard whatsoever.
No, indeed. I do have to give credit, though, because there are some politicians who are raising their head above the parapet. And I think we're both fans of this guy, as bad as the Tories are on so many levels. So credit to Robert Jenrick. It's difficult if you're a frontline politician, especially in the Justice Brief, to talk about an ongoing case. But Robert Jenrick did so on Talk. Watch this.
A basic sense of fairness within the criminal justice system. Look, it's a matter before the court now, so I can't comment on that specifically. She herself deleted the tweet because she decided it was wrong, and I certainly don't condone the comments that she made. But is it right that somebody goes to prison for that period of time for a tweet when you've got dangerous people being released early under the government's policy this week. And there are so many cases of people who've committed crimes so much more serious than this who are not going to jail. And I'll give you an example. This week, a man avoided jail despite it being found that he had 12,000 images of children on his computer, pornographic images, one or more of children as young as 1 year old being raped. And the man doesn't go to jail for that. And yet here you've got Lucy Connolly going to jail for a long period of time, as you say, somebody of previous good character for a tweet. I think that offends most people's sense of fair.
Well, Hugh Edwards didn't go to jail, did he, Connor?
No, quite rightly so. And quite rightly to point that out. Again, there are far too many of the most egregious criminals who escape accountability. And at the moment, the Labour Party are letting out serial sex offenders, as they've already let out violent offenders early, to ease overcrowding. And it's funny, the prisons minister has already given an interview to The Guardian a couple of months ago saying that they are doing this in anticipation of another summer of disorder. So they are specifically letting out violent and sexual criminals from prison early and telling magistrates not to give harsh sentences to these criminals in anticipation of a time where they would need to lock up more political prisoners like Peter Lynch and Lucy Connolly. So the state, the security state, is setting itself against the aggrieved, and quite rightly so, native host population who are sick to death of avoidable tragedies being visited on their children by imported client classes. And the police are running, essentially, by persecuting this online speech like Lucy Connolly's, a protection racket to preserve the pristine reputation, undeservedly so, of many tribal violent minorities. And I think it's a completely untenable state of affairs. And even The Economist today, who's got its head in the proverbial multicultural sand, have come out and said, oh, it's a bit alarming now that like the likes of Lib Dem councillors are being persecuted for these speech crimes. Shouldn't we think we tone it back a little bit?
The hypocrisy is always there, beautifully put. Connor Tomlinson, host of Tomlinson Talks on YouTube, a contributor to Courage Media and presenter of the D-Program podcast on the New Culture Forum. Thank you so much, Connor. We will speak very soon.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.